What's up, everyone? Welcome to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and today we are taking a look at the review of Cytress, which is presumably now on Kickstarter. I mean, I'm filming this before then and releasing it in the future, just because it felt more thematic that way. So hey there, future Chris. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you haven't been captured by any of those futuristic wizards or orcs. Anybody get that probably 2-month-old callback by now? It doesn't matter. In Cytress, you are playing as the leader of a mercenary crew in the underbelly with one goal: get your crew to the capital. Sorry. Get to Elysium. Sorry. Escape from District 9. No. Get your crew to the upper levels of Hangsha. No, come on. How long is this bit gonna go? Get you and your crew out of the underbelly and up to the city of Stratos, where only the wealthy and elite live. Because of course you want to be one of the wealthy elite. This is a futuristic society. They're the only ones who hold the power. And the only way to change everything for yourself or for others, you can decide. It's not written in the script. You can choose if you want to be an altruistic hero to the people, or if you want to be a selfish hunk of garbage only in it for themselves. Doesn't matter. The only way to change everything is to get you and your crew up to Stratos and also control the tubes that sent you up there. This is a game of engine building, area control, and proving once and for all that the way into Stratos might as well just be the internet, because it's through a series of tubes. Let's check it out. Now, Cytress is a game that feels more grandiose and imposing than it actually is, and this is a good thing, because the gameplay itself is actually quite simple. Each player picks a character and chooses a side. There are slight differences to the characters, but that's not something that you need to worry about on your first playthrough. But the turn structure is this. First phase, everybody gets resources depending on what's shown on your yellow lifeline. Credits, weapons, tech, and of course, drugs. I guess you can, in fact, make friends with drugs, because in this game, you can trade drugs for anything. Everybody loves drugs. You get a drug. You get a drug. Then in phase 2, you'll send out the leader of your gang to one of the 4 different factions, just one of the different colored player boards, and get that associated resource. And some of you will get additional resources if the leader goes on a specific color that you have in your blue lifeline. That's phase 2. And then finally in phase 3, you're going to send out your 3 cars to various points on the board to take various actions. These don't block any spaces. They can go wherever they want. Doesn't matter how many people are on a space. It's just so you get to feel like you move something, really, and can keep track of a few things. It doesn't matter. The main thing you're going to be doing on these turns is you're going to be buying a card from a specific color and adding it to that color lifeline on your player board. You're then going to take one of your crew cubes and put it on that associated color on the mini-map. Or instead of buying these cards, you can send your flying car to Stratos and build a tube from a place on the mini-map that you control, that you have a cube on, as long as you bribe a certain official of Stratos with the specific resource of their choice in the specific type of district that they have control over. So you might be in Orange, and you have to spend drugs, basically. You keep doing this until all the tubes have been built. You start with a common supply of 7 per player, and then the person with the most points wins. It's simple. Once you're done phase 3, you clean up and you restart the process all over again. It's really not hard to get the basics of. Now, the scoring itself is a little bit trickier, because while you do get points for the crew members on the varied level of Stratos at the end of the game, when you're building a tube, you can choose to commit either 5 or 11 or 18 resources to get you to Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 of Stratos, which obviously, as these futuristic societies go, the higher you are, the more important you are, and therefore the more points your crew member will be worth. But you also get points for the crew remaining down on the map in the underbelly, because whoever has the most crew members around a tube gets control of that tube, and they're worth an associated points at the end of the game. Around half of what the crew member who was sent up there was worth. In addition, other ways to get points: every time you purchase a card, there'll be 2 symbols on it. One is the type of gang that you're attacking. There's 4 different types of gangs. And the other is what you're doing to them. And there's 6 different things you could be doing to them: abducting them, looting them, terminating them, sabotaging them. You get the picture. If you match 3 symbols, you can go collect the bounty for that particular gang, and that's worth points at the end of the game. Or if you match 3 symbols of what you did to them, then you can ascend your skill, and that's worth 3 points for every skill that you ascend. And you get a discount on whenever you take that action in the future. But that's it. That's the basic bones of the game. That's the basic scoring of the game. It's all about managing how you juggle these 4 different streams of points to get the jump on your opponent while simultaneously developing the 4 different colors of life path to help you along your way. The orange life path, which we didn't talk about, discounts all actions of whatever colors you have in them. And then the pink life path allows you to trade resources at a more favorable rate. And this engine building mechanic, adding these different parts of each life path to make your character and crew feel strong and powerful and you keep on getting stuff, is one of the highlights of the game. It's fun. You also have to make sure that you have enough of the resources to meet the demands of the Stratos elite up above. That's important, but it's equally important to develop these life paths effectively and purchase the ones that you need to complete those bounties and to ascend your skills. And I love that the board will always be modular, which makes the pockets that you can carve out on your empire a little bit different every game. And it's satisfying because it is really easy to buy things. The cards or the level 1 tubes don't really cost that much at all, especially if you have some in the orange life path to discount them. But the higher value tubes, the 3-tiered tubes getting you all the way to the top, that's going to cost you a lot and will take some forethought to build up. And this progression feels satisfying. It doesn't take too long and it feels cool. And it feels good when you're able to buy that triple, because triples are best. I find with these sorts of games, engine builders in particular, you want the process of building this engine to feel as satisfying as when you reap the rewards. And I think this does that very well. And I also think the board is a really neat addition. The positioning matters. It matters quite a lot, which we'll get into in a second. And that's why I'd rank the area control aspect to be even more important than the resource management aspect of the game. But talking about mechanics aside, and we could talk about them all day because they've thrown in just about every buzzword you could think of. Oh, and it's action selection. Yeah. Even still, all the mechanics work together really well. And it's very satisfying to do. The steps you take in the game all feel like viable things. Whether or not they're actually viable things, I'm not sure they are. I've never seen anyone need to take the loan action, for example. Although you could do that as a reassign action, setting yourself up in the next round, so sure. But what matters is that everything mostly feels viable. What is a bit disappointing to me, the more I play it, the more it feels like the game needs to take place in these phases. And not the phases 1, 2, 3, but these set steps of the process as you go towards the end game. I mean, hey, maybe I'm just not that good at it at all. But on my first few games, I dramatically neglected the importance on the area control portion of the game and the scoring. I was far and away always ahead on building the tubes and getting my crew members into Stratos. But that's only half the scoring because I was letting my opponents or opponent capitalize on the tubes that I had left behind and scoring them at the end with their significant board control, which severely impacted my lead. And on the one hand, this is a really good thing. This will always make the scoring pretty competitive because if someone hasn't had a chance to build a lot of tubes, well, they have more people on the map and will win those tubes at the end of the game. But on the other hand, it's a little disappointing because it feels like the game leans a bit too much towards that catch-up mechanic. And it's not a catch-up mechanic. Let's be clear, it's an integral part of the scoring system. Otherwise, there would be no need for the map or the board, and people would just speed run their tubes, and that would be the game. It would be a different game. But at the same time, in our first game, we had a member around the table throw the biggest ante I've ever seen because they felt like we were ganging up on them and not letting them build the tubes that they wanted. Even though that's actually impossible because you can always build tubes of the Stratos locations depending on what they want. And then there's also another section called the Net Prowler where you can build a tube, cost the same amount of resources. You can build it on any place you want and pay whatever resources you want. The only difference is you don't get to reassign that ship at the end of the round, and thereby you lose an extra action that you gain by fulfilling the Stratos, the way the Stratos Elite wants, right? But they got upset and they wasted turns just taking loans because they didn't want to play anymore. And they still ended up winning just because their board presence was so significant. And in theory, I think this works well, but it's much easier to impart the idea of building the tubes to new players rather than the area control portion of it, especially when the value of the tubes is 50% less. So it just feels a little bit unsatisfying when someone who wasn't as efficient in terms of building their tubes just turns out to net a bunch of points. And while a lot of this can be said, like that was our first game and we didn't realize the importance of it, and this could just feel like I'm angry that my strategy wasn't the winning one, which it really isn't the case. As I played more and more of the game, it made me realize that the game should take place in these stages, which did lessen my enjoyment of it. Because I don't feel like this is a game of claiming some spots on the board and then trying to send your crew members up to Stratos to get influence up there and pave the way for your arrival, as is set out in the game's premise. It feels like a game of trying to claim all the important spots on the board first, building your engine, working on completing those bounties and ascending those skills. And then, only after you've done all that, you can work on starting to build the tubes and sending people up to Stratos. And maybe that is thematic. Maybe you have to wait until the entire city is under mercenary crew control before you can start paving the way towards a better future. But for me, it makes the game feel a little bit more scripted, and that there isn't necessarily room to carve out a little corner and build a bunch of tubes and then carve out a little bit more, because by the time you do that, you've wasted enough time that all the spots in the map will be taken. And so you need to fight for that positioning first and then work on getting the resources. And when I realized that that felt like the optimal strategy, it lessened my enthusiasm for the game a little bit, because I felt like I had less choice. And I liked the choice. I liked the choice of choosing when to take a spot on the board and when to build a tube. I was disappointed when that choice seemingly was taken from me based around what made the most sense strategically. I just felt the loss of that freedom. And that was a disappointing realization, which made my enthusiasm be a little bit lower than when I first played it the first couple times. Because it is fun. I do like the scoring at the end. I like the little tweaks that even in the end scoring, you get to score points for your extra resources, but you only score points for each specific resource for every 3 that you have of that resource. It's not like you just get to add everything together and divide by 3. If you have 5 weapons and 2 credits, you only get 1 point because you haven't made it to the 3 in credits and you haven't made it to the 6 in the weapons. And so I think that little tweak to a normal system of you get points for whatever resources you have left over, that little tweak to it makes the bookkeeping feel a little bit more satisfying and makes you feel a little bit more brilliant when you manage to juggle your resources effectively to maximize the final points that you can get. I really like the design of how the board's set up. I like how all the pieces, the main board pieces, interlock together to make one nice thing where the map can sit in the middle. And I, of course, love the Everdell tree. Sorry, the Stratos city. It's an addition that absolutely doesn't need to be there whatsoever. You could just have a board that says tier 1, 2, 3. Who cares? But it's fun. It's fun to create table presence. It gives you the sense of trying to struggle up from the underbelly. It makes sense thematically and mechanically with the levels of tubes going up to the levels of Stratos. There are a lot of little touches in this game that really help elevate the experience. So I know I've talked a lot about that area control system and how the stages are a little disappointing, but I still did really enjoy the game. I just wish that maybe the scores for controlling the tubes were slightly less, maybe a point less for each. I don't know. That might make the difference in terms of the importance factor, or make the game a little bit less by the numbers as it is right now. Because remember, this is still a prototype, and I'm sure there will be additional balance tests out there to completely prove me wrong and show the world that I'm a dumb idiot, and that this is the way that it should be. But overall, I'm still pretty positive on this game. I'm not sure what the price point will be. I haven't seen a preview page yet. The cheap part in me wants it to be something like 40 bucks, which I know it'll probably be around that $60 level, which is kind of the average for games nowadays, 50 to 60. And I think it's a decent price point. I'd like to pay the average. Of course, you always have to factor in shipping with these Kickstarters, so it's a tough call, but that's where I'm hoping it will be. We'll see what happens when this video is out. And as for the player count, I feel like you are getting a similar experience at all player counts, but this is definitely one that I would play primarily with more than 2 players. That would be my recommendation. The back and forth feels a little bit too much of the same with 2 players, whereas I personally preferred my experiences when the board was larger and there were a few better ways to capitalize on haphazard tube placements from your opponents. Or at least having multiple people fighting over different tubes helps spread the wealth a little bit more, although it does make for a longer game. So definitely more than that 2-player count. It also helps lessen the feeling of the stages as well, although I feel like that is a little prevalent in all player counts as well. However, when all said and done, the bottom line is this. Cytress is an entertaining meld of mechanics with a theme that makes sense that should be easy to teach and play. If you can get around those hang-ups of it feeling like it takes place in stages rather than truly free-form, it will provide an interesting spatial puzzle with a feeling of racing to get to everything first and some solid engine building. It does suffer a little from every action feeling too close, without necessarily a clear way to get ahead, that every opponent will also be able to access something to negate those points that you just got. But it still is a game that I would be happy to play anytime someone suggested it. So there you are. Those are my thoughts on Cytress. Definitely go check it out on Kickstarter. See if it's right for you. I'm excited to see how well it does, because overall, I really did. I did have a good time with it. But of course, like everything, it's not going to be for everyone. So I hope that this video was helpful in determining if this is a good choice for you. If it was, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't. It really does help me out a lot. You're not going to get spammed. You're here already organically. All I talk about is board games. Just do it. If not, that's okay too. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Chris George, and I don't have a catchphrase. But at least until I send it off to the next reviewer, I still have a series of tubes. I know I used that joke already. What do you expect from me? It's late at night. I'll see you in the next one.